on the podcast, we have Ali Parsa, founder of two health businesses that have reached unicorn status, Babylon Health and Circle Health. Ali was born in Iran, but left when he was 16 in the aftermath of the Iranian Revolution. Amazingly, he taught himself UK high school and went on to study at the University College London. Ali sold a media company he started during university and then joined the investment banking world. 20 years ago, he set up Circle Health, the first private company to run a UK NHS hospital, which became Europe's largest partnership of clinicians with around £200 million of annual revenue and 3,000 employees. Circle Health was taken public in 2012 and Ali stepped down as CEO. Then in 2014, Ali founded Babylon Health, a health service provider that enabled users to have virtual consultations with doctors via the app. At its height, Babylon was a unicorn with a huge amount of revenue, and Ali led Babylon's listing on the New York Stock Exchange, with Ali calling the decision to go public through a SPAC an unbelievable, unmitigated disaster. Now Ali is bringing a lifetime of lessons from right at the top of American and British healthcare to his next company, Quadrivia, an all-in-one AI health assistant. In this episode, we talk about how AI can transform healthcare, the lessons from failure, what Ali learned from Babylon Health, and what the perfect age is to build a startup. Ali, I've been looking forward to this one. You and I have had some brilliant conversations over the years about how AI is going to completely transform the very broken way we receive healthcare. The whole purpose of this show of Giant Ideas is to bring those conversations that we're privileged to have at Giant House with people like you to our listeners. I've loved going on the journey of discovery with you as you've planned your next act in health. That aiming phase, I think, is super critical for entrepreneurs before they actually start the company. You've now launched. Tell us about the new business.
When we wanted to start again, Tommy, I called many people I knew at the leadership of healthcare in various countries with a question that what is the biggest problem that is facing you right now? And invariably, the answers always came to the same thing: workforce, having enough people. And when you think about this, you kind of think, how could it be that in countries as wide apart as Thailand, Singapore, China, United States, United Kingdom, Africa, various countries in Africa, northern countries, we have the same issue? That cannot be incidental, must be structural. And if you think about the structural problem in here, is that we have an inherent imbalance in healthcare between elastic demand. You and I, if anything goes wrong with our loved ones, we will spend or want to spend as much money as we can and as much time and effort as we can to solve that problem, versus a very constrained supply. And that problem is structural. And what AI gives us now for the first time is the promise to be able to match an elastic demand with an elastic supply. And if we can do that, we will solve the most fundamental problem that makes healthcare inaccessible, unaffordable to the vast majority of the people on Earth.
Amazing. And how does that translate into the company Quadrivia? What will Quadrivia do initially, and then what's the grand vision?
If we can create an AI assistant, a comprehensive, controllable, and manageable, trainable AI assistant, customizable, that we can put in the hands of every clinician to serve their patients, that can do all the bits of the healthcare that they can get assistance with, that should significantly improve the productivity, the ability, the reach, the scalability of the clinical workforce we already have in the world. So what we're trying to build is exactly that: a comprehensive, not a AI agent that solves one single administrative problem, but one that can comprehensively try to help you with your administrative and your clinical issues, one that is controllable, one that is trainable, that you can customize it the way you want to. Healthcare is delivered in many different ways, in many different countries. And our aim is to put an assistant in your hand that you can build a relationship with, that could be as eventually can become your partner in delivery of healthcare. And I think as AI is getting better, today AI can do some tasks, it can do some processes, but it cannot do a job. But AI is getting better every day. And it's getting better not just because our algorithms and our models are getting better. It's getting better because the underlying power behind it, and we can talk about that, is becoming much stronger every year.
What can AI not do today in health?
Look, if my child is ill, AI is not going to put its hand on the child's shoulder and say, trust me, I'm going to make you better. I'm going to trust AI to do simple stuff, but super complex stuff, I don't think so.
We've noticed here, and I think all of our listeners and watchers will have noticed, just the extraordinary pace of change with AI over the last 3, 6, 12 months. If you think about, for listeners, moving from Google search to ChatGPT or Perplexity, and then the new versions of those products and just the step changes every time they release a new version, quality and power of AI is changing very, very quickly. Maybe for listeners, just to help understand, in 1 year's time, what will AI be able to do in healthcare that is transformative to even today? And then when we think ahead to kind of 5 or 10 years time, where does it go there? Because this stuff is moving at incredible pace.
So Tommy, I was born in the Middle East. And in Middle East, we say, if you want God to laugh, you give her your 2-year plan. So I have absolutely no idea how this is going to go, because there's so many factors that can define a future: availability of power, processing, politics, regulations, you name it.
And what does all of this mean for listeners? So is this about making the journey through a fairly broken healthcare system in whichever country you happen to live in a little bit less painful? Or is this going to lead to significantly longer lives, healthier lives, happier lives?
I think this will lead to almost, if implemented correctly and delivered as planned, and as we both know, life can come and give us a lot of things that we never expected. My personal life is full of things that I never expected. But assuming that we can overcome those challenges, this should provide constant, near-free availability of healthcare services to everyone, everywhere. In the same way that we have near-free availability of information to everyone, everywhere today. I think that's what it will do. Tommy, I think to your next question, which was, what is it going to do to our life? Does it going to make our lives longer? I think that whatever technology is doing today, it's almost going to be eaten for breakfast by what is happening in the world of biology. If you just look at what is happening in that world, that fundamentally can change our expectation of healthy life and the way we've grown up. Look, today we have created a worm that can live 10 times longer. We have stopped the aging process in a tomato. We have even reversed the aging process in a mice. What is happening in the world of biology, I think, will have a very different set of effects on the way we will experience life and longevity. But AI will also make a contribution in accelerating biological development. I think when you put all of that together, Tommy, the future is incredibly compelling, very exciting. We just need to make sure that we use all these forces that we are unleashing for good.
I completely agree. And, in our practice at Giant, we've been investing, yes, in healthcare AI companies, but also in what we think of as the century of biology, which is a phrase we borrowed from one of our portfolio founders, Edward Shenderovich, who founded Synonym, which is aiming to completely transition the world of manufacturing away from hydrocarbon-based manufacturing to using plants, to using biology to manufacture everything from cosmetics to food to enormous array of products and services around the world. So I'm with you there. Ali, shifting gear a bit, there are very few people who have worked right at the top of both the UK healthcare system and the US healthcare system. The UK healthcare system is broken. That is the words of Wes Streeting, the new health secretary. His initial statement was, my policy is the NHS is broken. The US is riddled with an enormous amount of perverse incentives with insurance companies. What's your diagnosis? And if you were running those systems, what would you be doing to try to fix them?
I think the healthcare system, not just in US and United Kingdom, but I think it's globally broken. And it's globally broken because of this fundamental imbalance between the demand and supply. If you put that imbalance in any other sector, you will have the same broken results. Because once you have enormous, uncontrolled, elastic demand and only so much supply, you have to somehow distribute that supply. You either ration it and therefore make sure almost everybody doesn't get enough, or you just give it to whoever can pay most, or one way or another, you have to figure out, you have to distribute that constrained supply among the elastic demand. I think if you can solve for the constraint of supply and make the supply as elastic as the demand is, I think that will change the fundamental inequality in healthcare. In my own lifetime, Tommy, that has happened on information, right? I had to go to a university to do a PhD, to have access to the library of that university, to learn from those amazing lecturers and professors who took me and mentored me. But today, we almost have accessibility to information near for free, thanks to Google and other information technology companies, for everyone, everywhere. A professor at Stanford was telling me that one of his best students was a teenage girl from Pakistan who just joined one of his MOOC classes and did so fantastically well. She came top of the class and is now studying with him back in Stanford. That kind of democratic availability of information, I think, is what is going to happen in healthcare. It's not here now. It won't be here tomorrow. But that is something we need to work for in order to get it.
Let's talk about Babylon. In your own words, it was an enormously powerful product. It created, huge amounts of benefit to patients, and it created a lot of revenue. Why did it ultimately fail?
So I think, look, there was two answers to this. The simple answer, and both of these answers are true. The simple answer is we had a series of highly unfortunate events. We made a decision to take the company public. That was probably too immature. We made the decision to take it public through a SPAC, which was the rage at the time. That was clearly wrong, because every SPAC company, that especially of our cohort that came at the time we did, failed. We got unlucky that it came out in October 21, and the SPAC market fell apart in September, beginning of October 21. So we were left with $350 million that was supposed to be, we were supposed to receive, and that money didn't arrive. And once it didn't arrive, we became public with a huge gap in our balance sheet for everybody to see. All the SPAC companies are being shorted by the hedge fund community, and every one of them almost collapsed. And we were no different than anyone else. The fundamentals of the company was super strong. We were still growing at 400% a year. We were reducing our losses significantly. We were actually, by the time the company sadly collapsed, we were only $50-60 million away from profitability. So that's And then we made a series of wrong decisions at the time. Our shareholders, sadly, didn't have money to give and cover that gap because they were having their own challenges. The whole market was falling apart. Our debt holders thought that they could take advantage of the situation and own the company, but they just couldn't. They wanted to merge it with another company they had that wasn't doing very well, and that didn't work out for them. It just wasn't their area of competence. So a series of bad decisions, clearly from all of us, but also a series of unfortunate events. I don't think by any stretch of imagination was inevitable. I just think it was what happened. But that's if you want, is a simplified answer to this. Bad luck, so on and so forth. Ray Dalio, who was on your show just before me, I think in one of his principles in his great book is that adversity together with reflection and learning is what creates progress. So as you can imagine, when Babylon failed, and as somebody who is a failed scientist, I always wanted to be one, or that's where my training is. I spent a lot of time thinking about what were the fundamental reasons behind that. How did we even allow that bad luck to affect us the way it did? And the learnings I took away from that, Tommy, are manifolds, but I just list some for you. We used to say in Babylon, dream big, build fast, be brilliant. And I think all of those were absolutely true. But in implementation of all of those, we made mistakes. And I don't think that's unique to us. I think if you look at any single company, they would have made one or other one of those mistakes. So I think it's super important to take a very big market and try to solve a very big problem. But in doing so, I think it's also very important to stay very focused within your resources on what you can and cannot do. We were growing at 400% a year, every single year in Babylon. The demand for the product we were delivering was almost unlimited. People loved it. Our customers loved it. We never almost lost a single customer ever, and they were all growing. So we went in 2018 from 5 million of revenue to 2019, 20 million, 2021, 80 million, 22, 300, 20 million, 23, 1.1 billion. And by the time we almost collapsed, we were running at $1.5 billion of revenue. Right. But I think that we should have stayed more focused and curtailed that growth, not thinking or believing what we were being told, that finances will always be available to fuel that growth. The second lesson I learned is that, we say build fast. That is super important. And you remember Reid Hoffman wrote the book Blitzscaling, which was like, you just put anybody anywhere, just build fast, because once you got the market share, you can fix all the problems. I think that is important because life is short. But I think the other principle we had, which is be brilliant, is a balancing count to that. So you should never compromise on the quality of your product, on the quality of your people, on your team. We were super lucky to have brilliant people in Babylon. But like Reid Hoffman in his book talks about, when you're growing really fast, just put any bum on any seat. And while we didn't do that, maybe sometimes we should have slowed our growth a bit, make sure that we check on every piece of our product a little bit more carefully. Because as you build a product, if you make it go wrong in one place, it'll slow you down later. So this technical debt that gets created. And then being brilliant also means keeping control for your mission, for your vision, for what you're going to do. Needing the money that we needed meant that we lost control of the company. Like me and my employees, one of the greatest successes of Babylon was that we collectively, having raised over $1 billion of money, we still owned near 50% of the company. And just think about how rare that is today. And we managed to do that partly because we are in a massive sector, healthcare, where $1 billion seems like a lot of money to us, but all of our competitors had raised hugely more, like Oak Street Health, who went public just a little bit ahead of us. Well, we couldn't raise that 300 million. They raised, and their shareholders gave them over $3.5 billion of money in that very same period. Like a good friend of mine who used to run parts of United Health used to tell me that this is $1 trillion of industry, and you guys are investing in tens of millions, hundreds of millions. While at United, we are putting 20, 30 billion to work every year just in acquisitions, right? So I think those are the things we learn. But fundamentally, then it comes down to the financials of a company. And I think what I learned, and I will never do again, is you have to keep the thing that you're above everything else in control of is your expenses. So you should keep your costs always down and never believe that the money always going to be there. You should have a business model that continuously is leverageable from revenue, from operations leverageable, and cash flow leverageable. And fundamentally and finally, you need to figure out your cash engine before anything else. But each of those, Tommy, are a very large and long conversation that you and I can have at another occasion. But I learned a lot, and I am grateful for the learning, but super sad for what we lost, because I think we lost an incredibly valuable company.
Ali, you mentioned control there. And for me, when I look at entrepreneurship and the vast array of entrepreneurs we work with at Giant, there's really two characteristics that stick out to me of the really great ones. One is persistence, obsession, that type of thing. And the second is control. And it's something that Alex Ferguson, the great football manager, talks a lot about in his definition of his success, was always retaining control. And that can have many different shapes and forms. For you, obviously, one element there was the nature of your relationship with investors and debt holders, equity holders. Has that experience changed the way that you think about venture capital? And when you're going to be building Quadrivia, will you do it differently? Will you change the way that you take money from VCs?
It wasn't incidental that we lost Babylon within 6 months of me losing control of the company. If you look at the decisions that was made at our board, the short-termism versus the long-termism, the sticking to the things that would have been right for the company versus the needs of the other people at the time. And by the way, none of those people made the wrong decision for them. In a world in which you all have to do what you have to do in order to survive, to do better. I think that our debt holders were instrumental in the way the thing ended up. But they didn't make the wrong decisions for them. They had another company that was in trouble. They thought that they can take advantage of their position in the cap table to merge these two together and then solve two problems at one. And then as the markets recover, they both do really well and they do well. That was a perfectly rational, correct thing for them to do and the right decision for their stakeholders and their fiduciary duty. But it just wasn't the right thing for the company, for another set of stakeholders and another mission. And that's why I think control matters, because it allows you, helps you to stay true to your vision and to your mission. Whether that comes in voting rights or in having common shareholders with a common set of beliefs that don't have a conflict of interest, it doesn't matter. But you need to make sure everybody's aligned for the cause for which you started the whole mission for.
Ali, you tend to build as a sole founder rather than as part of a team of co-founders. Why have you made that choice with the businesses that you've started?
First of all, I never started thinking I want to be a sole founder or co-founder, or it's just that I think very deeply and very long about the problem before I started. And as you do those thinking, you go through a journey. And once you get to a destination where you become completely convinced that this is now something I need to invest my life on. Because for you, Tommy, when you invest in something, you have collected other people's money and then distributed, say, about 20, 30, 50 companies, doesn't matter. But you are hedging your bet. For me as an entrepreneur, I am putting all of my life, all of my family's future, all of the time I have, which I have not that much left in the world, into that one single thing. So I need to be super convinced and have worked really hard at getting there. By which time you're mentally in a place that is very hard to bring somebody else along too. So I think you will find many, many entrepreneurs who, once they get conviction, Elon Musk is one, Jobs was, once they get conviction, they're really going there. By the way, I know this, the VC community really likes co-founders, and I can see it from their point of view because they're hedging their bets, they're creating teams. But I also have seen far, far too many of these teams where the conflict between those co-founders eventually became one of the weakest links inside an organization.
For sure.
And far too many companies implode utterly unnecessarily just because of personal drama. I'm not a dramatic person, so and therefore I find it easier to align a team.
For sure. I think you're totally right. And I think it's one of the biggest reasons startups fail is co-founder breakup. Absolutely no doubt about that.
Why do you guys focus on that so much? It's really interesting to me. Everywhere now, because I get a lot of entrepreneurs coming to me talking about building companies, often that raising money, and they always tell me, well, one of the things we are first told is that go find yourself 3 co-founders or do this or do. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like you're putting a bunch of people who hardly know each other into a group just because they fit in that moment and expect to make very big decisions in a very long period of time in sync with each other on a subject that matters entirely on their livelihood. I mean, structurally, that's never going to happen.
I totally agree. And, there are a number of accelerators who shall remain nameless, whose sole reason of being is to mash together co-founders who literally have never met, get people to meet, and within a month, go start companies together. And to me, that just seems like a recipe for disaster, because how are you going to go on a 10-year journey with someone you met a month ago? So for me, I always look and go, if there's an amazing team which have worked together before or know each other deeply, that's pretty powerful because you can have different strengths and weaknesses. But meeting someone and then going and starting a company together does not seem like a recipe for success to me at all.
By the way, in Quadrivia, our biggest strength is exactly what you said, is that we have brought together an incredible team of highly experienced people we've been together for years trying to solve this problem. And even though one of our costumes has failed, the bodies and the brain is the same going into a new costume. I don't see these companies as separate. While they're separate entities, they all follow the same mission to bring to life our belief that healthcare is accessible and affordable for everybody and should be and could be.
I love that. I absolutely love that. The other thing that I think really resonates is the time that you've spent thinking about what this company is going to be. And as I mentioned at the start, that aiming phase, I think, is underutilized by a lot of entrepreneurs, because you're going to be doing this for 10, 15 years at least. And, as an entrepreneur, if you're not really thinking deeply for 3-6 months about what you're going to be doing for the next decade, it just doesn't make sense to me. So I think people go off in different directions and wrong directions because they haven't spent the time up front in that aiming phase. So, and it's been a privilege to watch you go through that aiming phase with this business. But let me ask you, Ali, you've now built 2 healthcare companies which have at some point been worth over $1 billion, created huge amounts of revenue. You sold your first company, I believe, aged around 30. You're now starting this one at almost 60. I wrote this article for Fast Company a while back on the virtues of experience in entrepreneurs and this fallacy of the college dropout as the perfect archetype of entrepreneur. And if you look at it, the average age of founders behind America's fastest growing startups, I think it's somewhere around 45. If you look at unicorns, a lot of unicorns, I think the average age of like starting them is mid-30s, even 40s. And then if you look at people right at the top of the game in the technology industry who are really driving a lot of the change, it's not youngsters, right? It's people like Jensen at NVIDIA. It's my old CEO at Microsoft, Satya Nadella. It's Sundar at Google. And these guys are, 50s, in some cases 60s. How do you think about that? Is that a positive in your mind?
You know, I actually think that almost in no other area in our life, we will say that we're going to back somebody with no experience. And would you go to a doctor with no experience and say, do surgery on my brain? Would you go to a scientist with no experience, right? That doesn't mean that the genius with no experience who has solved an incredible equation or has figured an incredible research is any less valuable. I just think that the question is about what value can you offer? And there are people who have come across great ideas, great scientific discoveries very early on in life that they can offer that and do incredibly well with it. But for most of us mere mortals, we need to gain that knowledge through experience. We need to just kind of work at it, make our mistakes, do better. For me, age almost has nothing to do with it, apart from the fact that the older you are, the more experience you gain. Against that goes the challenges of aging, the cognitive decline, the slowness of energy. So when I want to start a new company, I don't look at how old I am. I look at how fit I am. I can still swim 5 to 7, 8 kilometers. I can still do a lot of things that I could have done when I was younger. I still feel that I'm as sharp, as passionate as I used to be. And then the calculation for me is, will I be here in 10 years' time? Do I think that I have what it takes for the next 10, 15, 20 years, because that's what it takes to build a company of real substance, to be there? My assessment is that most of the people of our generation are going to do really well, even without all the discoveries in longevity, well into their 70s. But I think we have a long way to go.
Ali, just before we end, I want to go back to Babylon just because you've been on the receiving end of some pretty intense British media coverage. You're not the only Giant Ideas podcast guest who's had that type of intense coverage. It's a bit of an issue we have in the UK with our media. What's the one thing you want to set the record straight on about you or Babylon?
I don't know. I think, Tommy, when I read all the stuff that has been written about Babylon, so much of it is just pure fiction. It blows my mind how people can write what they write with so little knowledge. So we were asked not to do any interviews, and we decided not to. One of the biggest successes of Babylon was because everything we did was done so well and so properly that when a company of $5 billion public market value at its peak went into administration, we didn't have a single lawsuit. Think about this, in the United States. And that's because nobody could find anything that we did wrong. And then these journalists who were not lawyers, who didn't have access to the documents, didn't have access to us, would talk to some employee that only lasted with us 6 months, went then somewhere else and lasted only there 6 months, 3-4 months, and then come up with some fantasy and they make that the foundation of their story that the Babylon AI didn't work or was a spreadsheet. I mean, some of the things you read, you just think that, don't these people do research? I must say, most highly experienced older journalists that talk to us decided not to write because they said, look, if we can't get all sides of the story, we may end up being embarrassed in future. It was often the younger ones who were after a name who did. But anything you do that is public, you take the good and the bad. I'm sad that, and you're right about Britain, because that only came in the UK press. It was very rare in the US press, even though 95% of our business was in the US. But as things went wrong, I got a call from a friend of mine who's built a massive company, household name, everybody will know, but I hold the name. And he said to me, Ali, what's going to happen now is you're going to get a huge amount of criticisms and public thing. I'll bet you that you'll get it from people who have not achieved much and not from those who've done more than you. And it was so true. It is never the great coach like Alex Ferguson, who watches a football team and says, these people don't know what they're doing. It's always the guy on the couch who's never played football, who thinks that the rest don't know. Life is really hard. It's complicated. Sometimes you do well, sometimes you do bad. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you get unlucky. I was not very impressed by the people who sometimes incredibly unkindly did what they did and said what they said. And I was equally super impressed by the vast majority of people who gave us so much support, yourself included, so much kindness, and allowed us to keep our belief going. And that is always the majority. Those people with negativity are always the minority. Shame that they are a minority, and we should not allow them to darken our view of how wonderful humanity is.
Well, I'm incredibly proud of you that you've got back up and you're going to go again and do this all over again, which is not the easy option. The easy option would have been to say, okay, I've done enough. I've tried enough times to do this stuff in health. So it's awesome that you're doing it. Ali, we'll end with a question we ask every guest on Giant Ideas. What is it about being Ali Parsa that has made your extraordinary achievements possible?
I think I got very lucky at the moment in life that I thought I got the most unlucky. I was born in a very well-to-do, wonderful, loving middle-class family. And then the revolution in my country happened, and I was forced to leave at the age of 15, 16, entirely on my own, come away, build a new life, experience a kind of poverty, loneliness, chaos that I wish on no one. But it was that extreme difficulty that helped me learn how never to give up on a defeat, how it's very easy to overcome big problems, and whatever that is a huge issue shall eventually pass and you will get to the other side of it. I think that's what made me and most of the other people that I know that are resilient who they are. And I wish it on everybody. I wish it on my children. I think that we often, the more we create a society in which we solve other people's problem and don't let them, especially when they're younger, to face what is called desirable difficulties, the harder it gets for them later in life. So I'm grateful for the difficulties I had in life, but I'm generally, what makes me is I'm generally super grateful for just being alive, for watching the incredible world that we are all building together, for the potentials and possibilities that are in front of all of us. We are virtually, together with biology and technology, with science, we're virtually changing what it is to be human. What's the definition of a human sapien? And how lucky are you and I to live and witness it and hopefully be able to contribute to it a little bit.
It's a lovely way to end. And we'll have you back on in 10 years when this giant idea has taken bloom and has hopefully transformed the way we all receive healthcare around the world. Ali, thank you so much for sharing your giant idea with us today.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please do share it with a friend. And you can listen back to other episodes we've recorded with people like Ray Dalio, Arianna Huffington, and the founder of DeepMind, Mustafa Suleyman.